Hello guys, so here we are going to see about C language. Alright, so basically we will start with the very first concept about what a language is. So what is a language? So language is basically it is a medium or a way to communicate. Right, now if I want to communicate with another person, if one there is one person, if he wants to communicate with other person, so they need a medium to communicate, right? And we use a language, so that this language can be Hindi, English, Marathi, Tamil, Telugu, n number of languages we have, right? So in the same term, if I have a user or a person who wants to communicate with a machine, right? So this is my machine, this is my person, or I can say it is a user, right? If this person needs to give some instruction, to give some command to machine, then to for this communication to happen, this communication, we need a again a language. So in terms of our human, we need languages like Hindi, English, Marathi. In the same way, we need a communication language for communicating between a person and a machine, and that language is known as a programming language, right? So programming language is basically a medium, a way to communicate or to give a instruction to a machine, right? So using this languages, kind of Hindi, English, Marathi, two persons can communicate, and with the help of programming language, a person can give a instruction to a machine and the machine can respond back, or a person can, we can say a communication will happen between a person and a machine, right? So in our humans, like we have n number of languages, regional languages, right? Even out of the region, there might be Chinese, there might be English, there might be Japanese. These are all the languages which persons use to communicate, right? So there is not a restricted language, that there is no restriction that we only have to speak in, the whole world is speaking only in English. In the same way, on the programming side, it is not mandatory, or it is not a hard fix that we have to use a specific programming language. So we have C, C++, Java, .NET, Python, n number of programming languages. So we can choose any of these as we are choosing any of these, right? So basically, if I found a person speaking Hindi, I will communicate it in Hindi. If I found a person communication in English, I will use English. In the similar way, the architects decide which platform or which language is suitable for which application, and accordingly this decision will be taking place. So basically, of what a C language is, C language is basically a part of the programming language, right? So using C language, what I am doing is I am giving some instruction to the machine to follow, and the machine is giving back me the output. Now whenever you're talking about a language, there might be possibility that there is person 1 and person 2. Person 1 knows English and person 2 knows Hindi. Person 1 doesn't know anything about Hindi, person 2 doesn't know anything about English. Then how these persons will communicate? Because there is no common language to communicate. And how the person can be communicate? So they need a translator. So there is one third person who understands both the languages, and this third person, what this third person will do, he understands what person 1 is talking about, and he explains the same thing in Hindi to person 2. Similarly, whenever the person 2 communicates, he will understand what the person 2 is speaking, and he will translate the same thing to person 1. So we need a translator if there is a miscommunication, if there is a different mediums. In the similar way, whenever a programmer or a user who is using the application, he is writing the code, or we can take it as a developer who is writing the code, and he want to give some instruction to machine. So basically machine understands binary. Every machine understands only binary, and developer doesn't understand binary, because if I say I want to print hello, right? If the developer want to print hello, he will ask the machine to print hello, but the machine doesn't understand hello, machine doesn't understand English, machine understands only binary. Then how a developer can communicate, or how a developer can give an instruction to the machine? So again, developer have to convert this hello to some form of binary, right? But again, it is difficult to convert each and everything to a binary format for a developer, right? Because we are using machines to make our task easy, we are not using machines to make the task difficult. So what a translator here will do is, developer will type the code in English, the translator will translate it to binary, and which the machine can understand. Similarly, machine will give the output in binary, the translator will again translate back to English and explain to the developer, or shows the output to the developer. So who is the translator here? Is basically a compiler. So in our communication, we are using translator. In the same term, in programming languages we use compiler, but the translator is only translate the languages, right? But the compiler is not only translating, but it is also doing a checking of the code. So there are n number of tasks what the compiler performs. Out of that n number tasks, some of the important task is taking the input in the developer language and converting it to machine language, again taking the output as a machine language and converting it to developer specific language, right? So this communication is basically done through via compiler. But before this, suppose, let me first clean this. So suppose there is a developer, there is a machine, and both are communicating. So developer is giving some instruction and or some command, and the machine is replying back, right? So suppose if I am saying hello, right? So I want this to be printed, so I am giving this instruction to machine, and machine will print hello and tell me back that hello is printed. Suppose this is the task. Now the problem here is, suppose instead of this hello, if I write hello, right? And if I ask you that what is incorrect in this, you will clearly mention that there is a spelling mistake. The spelling must be HELLO, but what you have mentioned is HELO. That is what your answer is, which is perfectly right. So basically, how you come to know that this spelling is incorrect and this spelling is correct? Because from your childhood you are continuously learning this statement. On the day one, when you started forming these letters, words, your teacher tell you that whenever you are writing HELO, your teacher keeps telling you that this is the correct spelling, and your mind is created for this one now. So in your mind there is a dictionary which is matching the word what I am writing. If it matches, you are saying that yes, it is correct. If it is not matching, you are saying that it is incorrect. So as your mind is having a dictionary, similarly compile will also have a dictionary. So suppose, let's take, there is one function printf. This is a inbuilt function, we are going to see it in the upcoming chapters. So what is the role of this printf? It is used to print the statement or print the output, whatever you want to print, it is used to print. Now I have to write down printf, right? But instead of this, if I write print, so compiler will check, compiler is also having a dictionary, and compiler will check that okay, this is not the correct spelling, the correct spelling must be printf. So if you are writing printf, compiler will allow you, and it will move on to the next line. But if you are writing print, compiler will raise an error on this particular line that this is a incorrect statement or incorrect syntax, right? So how compiler is checking it? So compile is also having a dictionary. As your mind is having a dictionary, your mind is comparing the words with the already known words. Similarly, compiler will also do the same thing. Compiler already have a dictionary. It will match your syntaxes, what you are writing, what a developer is writing, with the syntaxes it already have. If it matches, it will allow. If it doesn't, it will raise an error. So basically, this is a basic of a language. Alright. Okay. Now, whenever we talk about any language, so basically, if we are talking about C language, so basically, if you talk about any random languages, whatever we have seen right now is common, right? But whenever we talk about a particularly C language, so there is something different. So C is known as a middle level language. Now, what is a middle level language? So basically, there is a low level language, there is a high level language, and between that there is a middle level language. So low languages are those languages which are machine friendly. For example, assembly language. These are machine friendly, means developer have to struggle to write down the code and machine is enjoying the code. Machine will easily understand this code, right? So that is a low level language. A high level language is developer friendly. Basically, the developer is enjoying the code and machine have to struggle now. So developer will quickly write down a one line statement, and for that one line statement the machine have to work for 10 line statements. It is kind of this one. So you are writing a single line, but in the background the machine have to work for, let's say, 10 lines. So that is a developer friendly. What is middle level? If I So these languages have the capability to go in the left direction as well as on the right direction. So C is a middle level language. So basically, using C language I can work as a machine friendly language. Even I can write down the code as a high level language. So just to summarize how I can do this, so there are two concepts. The first one is pointers. Might you have heard about this, pointers? So pointers is basically a concept. Using that you can work on the machine level. So using pointers I can work as a low level, right? And there is one more concept, functions. So using functions, basically we can write down the code which is a high level language. So basically C suppose both the things, pointers as well as functions. So using pointers I can write down a code which will behave as a low level code. Using function I can write down a code which will behave as a high level code, right? Okay. Now basically, any language whatever we take, basically every language have a four important questions what we need to discuss. That suppose if user is giving me any input, then how I will store that input? Means somewhere I have to store it so that in future I can operate on that. So the very first question is how to store the data. That will be my first question, that how I will store my data, right? As soon as I store the data, now the question arises is how to operate on that data then. So that will be my next question, that how I can operate on that data. Somehow I have learned about how to store the data, how to operate in it. Then the next question is how to handle the IO section, that is input and output section. Suppose if I store the data, I operate in that. Let's take example, there are two numbers I want to store, 1 and 2. So I stored it, 1 also I stored, in 2 also I stored. How to operate? So let's say I want to add it, so I know that I will apply plus and it will be addition. So I will add it. So the output is 3, but how I will show this 3 to the user? So that is what IO is. So how to handle the input and how I can take the input or how I can show the output. Or the next question is how to control the instructions. So basically instruction is basically a step what you are asking the machine to do, right? So suppose if there are multiple steps, there will never be a case that you will always follow the straight path. Suppose if I want to start with source A and I want to reach at the destination B, so there the path will not always be straight, right? So there must be some left turn, there must be some right turn, there must be some straight road, again some left turn, right turn, circle turn. So finally we will reach out to the destination. In the same way the coding will also behave. It is not always that execution will be line by line, line by line, line by line like this. There might be a decision taking, that if my decision is, let's say X, execute these two lines. If the decision what I am taking is Y, execute these lines. So there might be a decision power what you need in the programming, and that is what the 4 point is. And what are the answers to this question what your C language provides is how to store the data. The answer is using variables I can store the data. How I can operate the data? So C provide you a list of operators, using that you can operate on the data. How to handle the IO? There are some inbuilt functionalities provided, so you can say inbuilt functions are there, using that you can handle that IO. And for control instructions there are certain control instructions provided. So the answer here is how to control the instruction is using control instructions. And what are basically the control instruction is, I will give a few name. For example, that is switch case, loops, if else, and etc etc. So these are certain examples that you how you can control your instruction, right? So basically this is what a very overview, very basic theory we can say about the C language. Now we'll see a very short or simple program. So we are using a editor VS Code. So basically if I create a file and let's name it, suppose I want to perform a simple calculation for converting a degree Celsius to degree Fahrenheit. Now I will name it temperature conversion. Now whenever we create a C program we have to store that file using .c extension. If I press enter, on the right side I got a file. So let me write down the code and then we will see it one by one. stdio.h, then int main, in this float. So basically float is the data types, right? So float, then let's take, I want to take a Celsius and I want to take a Fahrenheit, then enter Celsius slash n. So just type, I will just type it out and we'll see it one by one. So percentage f, address of Celsius, and to convert it we have a formula 9 divided by 5 into Celsius plus 32, and finally printf Fahrenheit is percentage f 0. So basically this is what my code is. I will save it. Now we will see it one by one. What is this? So I will copy it and I will take it to a whiteboard and I will expand it a bit, right? So basically this is what my code is. Let me there are, I guess there are two copies. Okay, all right. So basically this is what my code is, right? Now we'll take it one by one. So basically whenever we talk about this first line, so we'll see the code line by line. So if you see, there is a very first step, that is, let me change the color so it will be easy for identification. So if I see, this is the first term is hash. So this is known as a preprocessor directive. Now what do you mean by a preprocessor directive is basically, preprocessor means something before processing. So this hash is telling the compiler that whenever you start processing this, whenever you start execution of this program, first run this line, right? Means first what first we have to run, the other word is include. If you see the next word, so hash indicates that it is a preprocessor directive, which means that first include this file and then only start your execution. So hash means it is a pre-processing thing. Before processing, first we have to run this, and what we have to run is we have to include, right? So if you can see, there is a next word is include, this one. So first include, and what we have to include means what? Attaching, right? Inclusion or attaching. So first attach, and what is this? So stdio.h, it is a file with the extension .h. So include this file in my program and then only start the execution. This is what the first line is telling me. So hash is the preprocessor directive. It means that before processing anything, process this line first. And what is the processing means? Including. Processing means here we are including. What we are including? A file with the name stdio.h. So first include this file and then only proceed further. So that is what the first line says. Now in the first line, this is the syntax. So basically this stdio.h, so now we will talk about this one. So .h stands for the header file, right? So header file is basically a file which have all the necessary syntaxes, or I can say all possible syntaxes, right, related to IO, because it stands for stdio, right? So the full form says standard input output header file. So what is there in this file? All the possible scenarios or all the possible ways of writing the IO functionality is defined over here. Alright, so that is what stdio.h stands for. stdio.h stands for standard input output. .h stands for header file. So what a header file is, basically header file is a file which have all the possible syntaxes of your input and output. So in this particular code, what I have highlighted here, so in this particular code I am only using, if you see, printf and scanf, and there is only a single formula. So I'm not using anything else. I'm just using a basic input and output. So this is what output is. Printf means printing, showing the output. Scanf means scanning taking the input. So I'm only dealing with inbuilt functions printf and scanf. Now how compiler will come to know that what is printf, what is scanf? So basically compiler is using this header file to see what is printf and what is scanf. So we have just seen a basic example that if I write a spelling hello, so you are telling me that this is the incorrect spelling and the correct spelling is HELLO. How you are saying me that this is incorrect and this is correct? By comparing it with the hello word which is already in your mind. So you already know hello spelling and you're comparing that spelling with my spelling, and you are easily capable to judge it. So as you have a dictionary in your mind, similarly the compiler is having a dictionary. We just spoke it, right? So that is what a dictionary is. std header files. So basically header files is a kind of dictionary which is already a compiler is keeping in place. So compiler will take that dictionary. So out of that n number of dictionaries, what we are saying that use this dictionary. So compiler will go, it will take that file, it will attach it with my code, and then it will check one by one. Okay, this is correct, this is correct, okay, this is correct, okay, this is incorrect because the spelling is mistake, okay, this is correct, okay, this is incorrect because there is again a some formula mistake, something like this. So this is what it is checking. But how compiler comes to know that if printf is the correct one or print is the correct one? By checking this statement inside this function. So basically it is kind of a dictionary which compiler is using to check my code, because compiler is a machine, he doesn't have any brain, right? So that he can predict that this is correct or this is incorrect. So whatever we are providing it as a header file, compiler will use that header file to match. If it matches, is fine. If it is not matching, it is an error. So if you can see, so if this is my printf and this is also a printf, but if you see there is only a double quote in this one with a slash n, and in the second printf there is something percentage f, there is something comma, there is something ferh. So there are two variations of printf, in which in the first one I am not giving anything percentage or something, but in the second one I am giving it. There is no comma in the first one, but there is a comma in the second one. So which one is correct and which one is incorrect? So both are correct. And how the compiler will come to know that this is also correct way and this is also correct way? By seeing the header file. So using header file, compiler can easily judge that okay, these both are the correct ways or a incorrect way. So that is what a header file is. Now let me clean this. So I believe that the first line is clear to everyone. Now the second one. So the second one is int main. So if you see, there is a opening bracket and there is a closing bracket. So basically this opening bracket and closing bracket indicates that a scope, means from where to start and where to end, that is known as a scope. So what is this int main? It is known as a entry point, right? So basically this is a entry point. It means this, from this point the compiler will enter into the code and it will start executing the code. So every program, it is mandatory to have a main. If you do not have any main, then your code will never run, right? So main is a entry point which is mandatory in all the code. So where how many codes we are writing, if you are writing 1 2 3 or n, in every code we have to write main. If we do not have main, the code will never able to run. Fine. So this main, this is the entry point, and basically in programming terms we name it as a function. So what a main is? Main is a entry point, or you can say main is a function which behaves as a entry point, right? Main is a function which behaves as a entry point. So whenever you talk about this main, so most of the times you will see either this kind of syntax or somewhere you can see this kind of syntax. So basically this is the name of the function, right? This is what a function can receive and this is what a function can return. So void means nothing, zero, null. So this is my function name. So as I already mentioned that main is the entry point and you have to keep the name main only. It is case sensitive, so we cannot change it. It must be main. The second part is what a function is receiving. So the bracket you can see there are empty. Here also you can see that the brackets are empty. Means the function is not accepting anything. Here also the function is not accepting anything. But in the first line if you see int, in the second line you see void. So the first function, if you are writing the main like this, then you are saying that my function is also returning. See, I can accept anything, I can return anything. Suppose I want a money. So if I ask to my friend, give me money. So I am accepting the money. I will do all my work. Once I am done with my work, I will return back the money. So I am accepting the money, I am returning the money. This is what the behavior is. Void means I'm not accepting anything, I'm not returning anything, right? So here if you see what my main is saying that I am returning a int stands for integer. So at the last line you can see that I am returning 0, which is a integer, right? So if I am writing void main, then I do not have to write down return 0 because void means that null. If I am writing void, it means that I am not returning anything. If I am not returning anything, then I do not have to write down any return keyword. But if you are mentioning int, means you have to return a integer. So you have to write down return 0. So we'll see it why we are returning it. But I believe that this is clear now, right? So the second line is also clear that it is an entry point. It is a function basically, right? And since we are returning 0, so we have to mention int. If we do not return anything, then we can mention void, right? And it is a entry point, so it is mandatory write down the main. Now what is this float Celsius and Fahrenheit? So basically we just saw that there is a variable through which we can store the data. So basically here what I am doing is float means a decimal value. So what is the syntax is the data type and the variable name. This is what the syntax is. So data type is basically the type of the data. For example, if I want to store numbers, only numbers, whole numbers, then I can use int. If I want to store decimal values, I can use float or double, both are same. If you want to store characters, you have to use char. So basically these are known as the data type, the type of the data, right? And the variable name, so the variable name can be again anything. So ideally we use a preferred name through which we can easily identify what is the purpose of that variable. So basically I have, see, the decimal can be, or maximum times it will always be a fractional part. Let's take 31.2, 38.8. This is the fractional part, right? So there is a majorly chance that the Celsius or Fahrenheit, these are the temperatures and it will always be in the decimals. So that's why I am taking float and not int. Int stands for integer. So it is not always integer, it will always, sometimes or most of the times it will always be float. So what I have done is comma means there is a separate variable. So I have first variable with the name CEL, stands for Celsius, then comma, the second memory, so again Fahrenheit, right? So float occupies 4 bytes of memory from the RAM and this also 4 bytes. So total 8 bytes of memory from the RAM I am consuming for these two variables. Now for this line, so this line indicates that create two variables or two memories of type float which will store a float value. So this is what in the memory is 4 bytes for Celsius, 4 bytes for Fahrenheit is reserved, but there is no data inside this. So by default whatever data we have, that is known as a garbage value, right? So if you do not store anything into the variable, the default value is there, and that default value is garbage value, which is unpredictable. It can be 1, 2, 10, minus 100, minus 50. It can be anything. We cannot predict it. That's why, sorry, we treat it as a garbage, right? So this is what the garbage is. Now I have these variables created. Now next line is I am printing, because how user will come to know that what I have to enter, whether I have to enter Celsius, whether I have to enter Fahrenheit, or both, or nothing. So we have to give a message to the user, right? So for example, if I'm going to ATM, if I insert my card, then there is a message enter pin, and if I enter pin, then there is a second message enter money. But let's take there are no messages. Then if I enter the card, the machine is waiting for my input, but I am not getting what I have to enter, right? I Whether I have to enter a pin first or whether I have to enter amount first. So messages are important for user to understand what action needs to perform. So what here we are doing is we are giving a message. So printf is basically a function. It is a inbuilt function. How to handle the IO? Inbuilt function. So that is the inbuilt function. So printf is a ready-made function, and whatever you give inside this double quote, it gets printed on the screen as it is. So printf inside this I have double quote start to double quote end, and the message is enter Celsius. So on the screen I will see enter Celsius, and after that there is slash n. It is known as escape sequence. So escape sequence is basically escape means it will always escape from printing. So it will never print like this, and instead it is having a special meaning. What is the meaning? Change the line. So enter Celsius, and as soon as the compiler strikes slash n, it will come down on the next line. So that is what the meaning is. Slash n stands for new line, right? Now the control is waiting for the input. Now I want to take the Celsius, because Fahrenheit is what I am converting, but Celsius is what I need. So for that also we have a inbuilt function, a ready-made function. What a scanf will accept is, first there are two parameters. So if I write down at secondary part scanf, or let me do one thing, let me write it from here. There are two parts. One is percentage, second is address of CL. So basically scanf is having two sections. First we need to tell the scanf that what a user will enter. So for percentage F stands for float. So if I want to scan an integer, there is percentage D. If I scan float, percentage F, percentage C. So these are all known as these are all formatters, right? Kind of using that we can format it, or we can scan the values, right? So these are known as specifiers. I'm specifying that what I want to scan, right? So what I'm scanning is a decimal value, which is float. See, so for float the reserved specifier is percentage F. So using percentage F I can I'm telling the compiler that take the float from the user, right? And so scanf will take the float from the user, and where to store. So this is the syntax, that is ampersand, which we will come to know in the upcoming sessions, right, related to pointers. So basically it is a concept of pointers, but for the time being you can understand it that this is a part of your syntax. So address of, it is known as address of Celsius, means go to Celsius and store over there. So take a float and store it to Celsius. This is what the meaning is. Scanf, the first part says that what we need to take is take a float, and where to store is store it in the Celsius. For example, 31.1 user entered, so that gets stored to Celsius. Now what I am doing is Next line, 9 divided by 5. So 9 divided by 5 is, in my math term, it is 1.8, correct? Multiply by Celsius. So now compiler will go to this memory and take the value, that is 31.1 plus 32. So it will solve this. Whatever will be the output, it will store it to Fahrenheit, and means it will go to this location and store. So right hand side will always get stored to left hand side in programming. So it will first solve it. Whatever the output is, it will go and store to this memory locations. For example, let's take 91.1, a very raw example, right? So it gets stored, but I am storing it, but I am not printing it. I am not showing it to back to the user. So again I want to print it. So Fahrenheit is, so it, whatever we have already seen, that whatever we write in the double quote, it gets printed as it is. So similarly it will print Fahrenheit is, and after that I want to print 91.1 like this. This must be my output. So this is the fixed string, so I have used this. But at this point I want a data stored in my variable. So what type of data is this? Float. So that's why percentage %f. Similarly we have used here. I want to scan a float, so percentage %f. I want to print a float, again percentage %f. This one. And what value will be replaced over here is, you have to specify at after the comma. So after comma it is ferh. So it will go to ferh, take the value and print at your specifier, that is percentage %f. So that will be the result. And finally, since we are mentioning that int, we have to return a integer, so I am returning 0. So basically this is a convention or a better way to write down a program. So if we are returning 0, it indicates that, so where this return is going back. So basically if I take a money from my friend, I have to return back to the same friend. I can't return the money to another friend. So similarly, who started this program, this return value will given back to that same program, right? So who started the program? Basically operating system is managing my program, right? So operating system started the program. So my program is giving back 0 to operating system. 0 indicates that the execution of the program is successful, right? So returning 0 from the code indicates the operating system that my code is completed successfully. I do not have anything pending. So that's why we are returning 0, but it is again not a mandatory that we have to return 0. So in upcoming lectures we will see that if we do not return 0, how we can write down the code and everything. So that is the next session part. So I believe that this is having a quite basic sense, right? Now let me clear this. So basically this is what my code is, right? And I believe you understand the code in some sense. So this is very basic code. If I run this, so let's go to the code. How we will run it? On the drop down, run code, running code. So see, it gets started, enter Celsius, and it is waiting. So that is what we have seen, right? So till this point, so if you see, just float, Celsius, Fahrenheit, so there are two variables created, and now it entered, and the Celsius I am entering 31.1, enter. So I am getting the Fahrenheit as 63.0999, something like this. Clear? Okay, now I want to cross check this whether the output is correct or not. So what is my formula? So the formula says Fahrenheit is equal to 9 divided by 5. Let me open the calculator. So 9 divided by 5, which says 1.8, 1.8 into Celsius. So what is the Celsius I am entering is 31.1, that is 31.1 plus 32, so plus 32. Now if I again open a calculator, so let's check this. 1.8 into 31.1 plus 32. The output is 87.98, but what I am getting is 63.0. What is this? See, the formula is correct, right? Here also, if you want to see 9 divided by 5 into Celsius plus 32, the formula is correct, but when I am calculating it in the calculator, I'm getting something different, 87.98. But at the same time, when I'm running my code, it is not giving me the expected output. So this is incorrect, right? So how I can check this, what is the incorrect? Because if I'm running the code is running perfectly fine. So here comes the typecasting concept. So basically what is happening over here is, let me write down the code. Fahrenheit is equal to 9 divided by 5 into Celsius plus 32. Now the problem is this thing. Basically 9 divided by 5 I am expecting is 1.8, but compiler is not expecting 1.8. What the compiler is doing is, see, for compiler 9 is an integer number, it is not a decimal number. Divide by 5 is an integer number, it is again not a decimal number. So ideally the output in maths is 1.8, but for compiler, integer divide by an integer will always give you an integer, and this is not an integer, this is a decimal float value. So what compiler will do is, it will automatically delete this 0.8 and it will take only 1. So 1 is what? 1 is an integer number. So that is what the output is taking compiler into 31.1 plus 32, and that is what the it is calculating. So let me open a new instance of calculator and let me calculate it. So if you see 1 into 31.1 plus 32, see 63.1, that is what I am getting. 0.999, so it is a round off will be 63.1, right? 63.1. So basically all the compiler will always do this one. So C and C++, both the compilers behave in the same way, but when we come to Java, so Java has an intelligent compiler. It will never ever allow you to lose your data. So Java will give you error at this particular line that indicates that if you're dividing anything, there is a chance, a strongly chance, that you might lose your data. So you will be alert. But C and C++ compiler, they will never give you any such kind of alerts, and they will blindly do whatever you are asking. So if there is a data loss, the ideal step is integer divided by integer. It must give you 1.8, but it will never give you 1.8. So integer divided by integer will give you integer, and that comes 1. So here comes 1, right? So I want to tell compiler that do not divide an integer with an integer, because I am losing my data. So from these two, any of these two, you have to make one float. How you will make a float? 0.0. So if I give 9.0, then I will get a perfect output. So let's go and change it. So let's see, 0.0, save. Let me delete this, run. 31.1, the same input, and now you can see it is 87 point something, so 87.98, 87.98, right? So that is what the task is. Even you can do one more thing, that is 5.0. So out of these 9 divided by 5, anything must be a fractional part. So 31.1, still the output is 87.98. So I hope till this point it is clear to everyone, right?